Good morning. Welcome to Baird and Insulet's recap of the 86th session of the American Diabetes Association Annual Meeting. With us today, we're thrilled to have Dr. Trang Lai, Senior Vice President and Chief Medical Officer at Insulet. I do have to read one disclosure before we get started here, and that is to please refer to the event calendar, published research, or Baird's website for important disclosures regarding the companies discussed during this event. Dr. Lai, good to see you. Thanks for doing this again.
Great to see you, Jeff.
Yeah, always a good time to go through this. I think we were talking, this is our 6th webcast, a few at ATTD, a few here at ADA, so it's always a fun time.
Always.
All right. Well, let's get started. First question, and unfortunately we have to start here, but just on the recall that was announced a couple weeks ago, second recall in 10 weeks. I'd love to just hear from you. You're out there, I'm sure, talking to docs a lot over the last couple weeks. Just how has the response been from the physician community and even the patient community, if you've touched anything there?
Yeah, I've heard back from both doctors and patients, and people are generally very understanding and actually very appreciative that we proactively find these issues and communicate appropriately to both patients and physicians. I think it just shows that our company cares a lot about patient safety and quality. And, when we find an issue, we notify patients and do the right thing. And I think that means a lot to patients.
Yeah, no, that's a fair comment. How much has that been talked about here at this show? I've been frankly a little surprised. I haven't heard really any chatter about it. We've had a couple investor events with you and others at the company. It's barely come up. Is this something that you've heard much about here in your event?
No. Honestly, no one's asked me about it.
Okay, good. And from a sales rep perspective, have they been distracted at all? Have they still been able to be in the field selling, or is it really holding hands and talking about what the issues have been?
There's been no discussion really since after the first initial days. There's been really no further discussion about it. I was actually just in the field on Thursday, just before the conference. And I was in New Orleans territory, and it's just really fantastic to see how much we've grown. We are definitely number one in the region around here. And not one of the providers asked me about the recall. Yeah. We were really, it was all about, what is the future innovation that's coming. It just happened to also be the time that we had released the Omnipod 5 algorithm enhancements. So a lot of the discussion was about that and then what was coming at ADA. Yeah,
well, we'll get into all that, I'm sure. As you talk about being in the field, I didn't have this on my list of questions, but I think you guys recently expanded your sales force by about 25%.
Yes.
Are you going into new offices, primary care offices?
Yeah.
What's that experience like? Are doctors open to thinking about using a system when they haven't prescribed in the past?
Yeah. I'll just share, and actually I just found out this fun fact just this week. So not that long ago, our very first rep in this region used to take care of both Mississippi and Louisiana, the entire 2 states with our very first rep. And today, just in the Louisiana region, we have 6 territories. And so what that means is that as we commercially expand, it's not just a matter of going in further into white space, but it means we can have deeper conversations with our physicians and give them more attention and time. And it means our reps are spending less time on the road, which is really wonderful to see. And I would say I'm really impressed with the amount of interest that we see from primary care providers who want to be offering more state-of-the-art technology for their patients. So I'm genuinely sort of surprised and pleasantly surprised by the interest and enthusiasm from new providers.
Yeah, that's great. Well, maybe as we get into the fully closed loop part of the discussion, maybe we'll talk then a little more about the primary care angle and things like that. But let's move on to more positive topics. On pipeline, I know you've had the 05 enhancements that came out a couple weeks ago. The 06 next generation Omnipod launching next year. Some of the data came out on that. I referenced the fully closed loop for type 2. A lot of things to talk about, but I think instead of going 05 enhancements, let's first go to Strive and the next generation Omnipod 6, that should launch next year. I guess I'll just open-ended question. Just what do you think the key highlights were? Was it time and range? Was it reduction in boluses? Just talk us through what you thought the highlights from Strive were.
Yeah, all those things. So I would say, just to provide investors a little bit of background, this was primarily a safety study for Omnipod 6 versus Omnipod 5. So we know Omnipod 5 is a really fantastic algorithm. And when we want to deliver more insulin with our next-gen algorithms, we want to make sure that it's not generating more hypoglycemia than prior generations. So what we did was we recruited current users of Omnipod 5 who were already spending a large majority of time at the lowest target, so already reasonably well controlled. And then we wanted to make sure that Omnipod 6 for these patients at the lowest target of 100 would not induce more hypoglycemia. Okay. And so it was designed as a non-inferiority study, primarily looking at safety. And so we met those primary outcomes of non-inferiority for safety, so no additional time under 70, under 54. And the improvement in time and range was a 4% uplift, up to a 4% uplift in time and range. And so we saw people coming in at 73% already on Omnipod 5, coming up to 77% time in range.
Those were the type 1 adults?
That was right. Type 1 adults. And then time in type range increased by 7%. So really impressive findings. But as you mentioned, there was the additional phase called the bolus optional phase. This was a 4 to 6 week optional phase where we asked our users to deliberately bolus 3 times or fewer than 3 times a day. So they could bolus 0, 1, or 2 times a day. And the reason why we did that was to really induce a situation where they were bolusing less and allowing the algorithm to deliver more insulin. And so what we shared this week was that even when people were bolusing less, that they were able to achieve consistent time in range and time in type range between Omnipod 6 and with usual bolusing, and then Omnipod 6 with fewer boluses. So it was a 40% reduction in boluses and similar time in range. So overall, really impressive results, and I can't wait to launch it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a couple things there I want to unpack, but on that latter point on the fewer boluses, you're still at 3 boluses versus 5, I think, in this study. Again, that big reduction. But remind, especially investors, I'm sure physicians get this more, understand this better than investors do. This is an evolution towards fully closed loop.
That's right.
And this isn't the final algorithm. Obviously, we'll talk about the evolved study. We'll talk about some feasibilities in type 1 fully closed loop that you're getting ready to start. But you've got to kind of move down that road. And if you go from 5 to 3 here, you learn some stuff from the algorithm. And now a year or 2 from now, maybe you have a stronger algorithm, even more on the fully closed loop side.
That's right. Yeah. So we see this as progression towards fully closed loop, which is where the field is headed. And what that means, practically speaking, is that with every generation of our algorithm, we're going to be delivering more insulin so that the patient has to do less. So, with our what we showed with Omnipod 6 was that the system, the automated delivery component increased, and the total daily insulin did not increase. Yeah. So essentially, we're doing more, patient does less, progressing towards less burden for the user.
Sure. Okay. And you alluded to this, that these were patients who were already using Omnipod 5 at the 110 set point, I think, right? They didn't have the 100 set point. At the 110 set point, they were well controlled. That was clear by the starting HbA1c, I think on average was 7% in your study. Yeah. I think what Dr. Forlenza said yesterday makes so much sense, too, is that he could have said, and I'm sure most physicians could have said even before he saw the results of the study, there wasn't going to be a significant improvement in time and range because it's 7%. That already shows those were well-controlled patients.
That's right.
But you still got that 3 or 4 point time and range improvement, the 5 or 6 point time and type range improvement. So I guess where I'm going with this is, I think back to that retrospective review that looked at AID studies. I think there were over 50 studies over the last 5 years. The S-curve kind of that shows. And Omnipod has been a little bit at the lower end of that just because, again, you guys had higher settings, lower time in range.
Are you talking about the meta-analysis that was sponsored by Medtronic?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're talking about
I think that's the
thing.
one. You guys have showed it in your own slide deck.
Yeah.
The one I'm talking about?
Yes. Yeah. Did they only look at one? It's a bias analysis.
I understand, and I'm not trying to argue any points about where you are in time and range on that chart. My point is now with these results, you will shoot up near the upper end of that if they keep their analysis similar. That 76, 77% time and range will sort you at the higher end of that distribution curve.
Yes. Yeah.
And I know it's a very long-winded thing I'm trying to get to here, but what I think you accomplished with Strive is as others are moving into the pharmacy channel, as others are coming with two-piece patch pumps, even though they're semi-disposable, they're two-piece, they are closing or narrowing the gap. You now have time and range data. You can say, hey, our time and range is as good or better, even if others, or better, even if maybe you're narrowing, you as the competitors are narrowing some of the other areas, you can't come at us now on time and range.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. We believe that we have leading performance for algorithm. What I'll just, in providing a little bit of context, like I know that there is a lot of noise in the marketplace about different time and range, different products. I'll just go back, and this was actually on our website.
Right.
If you look at pivotal trial results in the either 18 and up or 14 and over age group, 74% time and range for Omnipod 5. This is the Omnipod 5 pivotal study. And very low hypoglycemia. And this is all on the website for people to see the comparison. And Medtronic was at 75%. And this is for 780G pivotal results. And so very, very similar results there. And so I actually don't think that there are even Omnipod 5 today without enhancements. I don't think is fair to say that the others have better results. I will say that with the enhancements that are coming and with Omnipod 6, we are definitely going to be ahead.
Okay. No, that's good to hear. So there was one other question I had on that. Oh, just the shift towards looking at time and tight range.
Yes.
That's been debated back and forth. I think a lot of people have fallen on one side or the other. Are you going to worry patients too much if you give them a lower number, if they see a lower number? Now you're leaning on that data a little bit more. Is time and tight range going to be something we'll start talking about more in the future, or do you think time and range is still the main metric that a lot of us will look at 2 or 3 years from now?
I think time and range is still the most clinically relevant parameter. I do think as the systems get better in terms of automated insulin delivery, the time and tight range becomes another feature, another parameter to look at. And I think as the algorithms get better, it really is like the time and tight range really enables you to see really how much time perhaps your algorithm is able to really keep the hyperglycemia levels low. And so in terms of algorithm responsiveness and insulin delivery and that tighter glucose control, it's just another parameter there. I still think time and range is great, and certainly I wouldn't be communicating to a patient time and tight range, but if you compare these across systems, it's another parameter to examine.
Understood. One other question is on Strive, but it kind of goes back to the O5 enhancements as well. When I look at some of the O5 enhancement data that you've shown here recently, I think time and range there did improve from the 110 set point to the 100 set point by a couple points.
Yes.
It's not too dissimilar from the improvement we saw from O5 110 set point in your Strive data to the O6, which was 2 to 3 points, I think, overall, more than that in the adult type 1.
Yeah.
So if the Strive O5 users were at 110, if they had been at 100, would we have assumed maybe their time and range would have been higher, and the difference between O5 100 set point an 06 100 set point wouldn't have been that different at all? Or can I not compare those two studies?
I think it's harder to compare. I think, should we talk about Omnipod 5 with enhancements?
Yeah. I guess, but it maybe help us understand what the differences are between the 05 enhancements that are out now and where 06 is different.
Yes.
Perfect.
Let's talk about that. So what we announced this week was algorithm enhancements for Omnipod 5 to the US market. And what this means is a new lower target of 100 and then improved alarm handling so that the patients can stay in automated mode for longer. And I think these are two significant advances in the system. I think with the 100 target, it makes sense, right? It's a lower set point, so you're going to be delivering more insulin earlier. You're going to have more insulin on board, so it makes sense to say you can have more time in range. The early data that we showed yesterday was on 79 users of Omnipod who were already using Omnipod 5, and majority of whom were already using the 110 target. And then, what was interesting to me was when they were offered the 100 target, actually only 60% of people chose to use it. So that's an interesting fun factor, right? Like, because people think that, they're not getting tight enough glucose control with Omnipod 5 yet. Not everyone chooses the lowest target all the time. And with that, you're right, we saw a 2% improvement in time in range, 5% improvement time in tight range, and if they were using optimized settings, up to 83% time in range. Small numbers, but really promising results. I would say the sort of Omnipod 6 incorporates those two changes, but it also has a more significant change in the algorithm in terms of the ability for the core algorithm to deliver up to 50% more insulin if the patient doesn't bolus. And so that's a more significant change in the algorithm, which is why we had to do a clinical study to prove that out. So I would expect more significant changes with Omnipod 6, even if you compared it at the same 100 target.
Okay, that makes sense. And again, for investors, I'm sure physicians understand this, but right now, the way 05 is designed is when the system delivers a certain amount of insulin, if it's reached its maximum amount that it can deliver, that's when it kicks the patient out of auto mode, right? And so by increasing the amount 06 can automatically deliver on its own, again, the time getting kicked out of auto mode should go down. And we saw that.
So one of the biggest complaints that we get about Omnipod 5 today, which we've seen with real world use that we, to be honest, didn't see in the clinical studies, is that if people don't bolus consistently, then the system responds to hypoglycemia, but it says, gosh, I've given you a lot of insulin compared to your total daily insulin. You need to check your CGM. We're not going to continue automated insulin delivery until you confirm that everything looks right. Then we're happy to go back into automated mode. And I would say the implementation of that was not quite as elegant as we could have designed it. And because of the feedback that we got from a lot of clinicians, hey, when my patients don't bolus, I get kicked out. They end up weeks and weeks not in automated mode. Can you do something about that? Us addressing that change, I think, will mean a lot more patients stay in automated mode. And it means in the real world, they're going to have better outcomes on Omnipod 5 today.
And I'm sure going back several years ago when 05 first launched, you have a lot of pediatric patients. You guys are uber careful about things. And that was probably the genesis of putting in something like that where it would kick you out to make sure. We weren't as confident in CGMs maybe a few years ago as we are today, things like that.
I mean, we did pediatric studies, Jeff, where the MARD of certain sensors were 35%.
For sure.
35%, so something we care a lot about, which is how long do you deliver insulin based on what looks like a CGM that is not appropriate.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, and again, this is all about that evolution, and it feels like it takes forever, but it's really only been a few years. So,
that's right.
Remind me the stat on, I think with the 05 enhancements, I don't think I'm getting it confused with the Strive data on 06. The percentage of patients, if they were below 90%,
11% improvement.
Yeah, then they went from 85 to 96% or something. Just maybe help investors, because I'm butchering those numbers. But.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. So what we did in the limited market release was look at people who were not spending over, so we specifically looked at those spending less than 90% time in automated mode. So it was roughly like 84%, but it was an 11% increase in time in automated mode to 95%. And what that means is people can stay in automated mode for longer, they're not getting kicked out as much, and it just enables the algorithm to do its thing a lot more. So, honestly, when I was talking to people in New Orleans, they were more excited about that than the 100 target, especially the pediatric population, where they're like, I don't always use the 110 anyway, but the ability to stay in automated mode for longer was really welcome.
Okay, great. And last thing I had on 05 enhancements, and again, I think it's the enhancements, not Strive. I think you've also moved the antenna within the pod, right? That's in 06? Okay, so 06 will have the antenna slightly moved. Theoretically, that should improve pairing. Maybe you won't have to. Maybe you will. Maybe you won't have to wear the CGM and the pump on the same side of the body, or at least have better connectivity.
It's definitely our design intention to improve connectivity between pod and CGM. Today, it is important that people wear their devices within line of sight, and what that means, practically speaking, is really as close as possible. So we want people to be able to wear their pods anywhere they want, and so Omnipod 6 will get us closer to that.
Okay, and so we talk about kind of that hardware improvement, maybe more time in automated mode, higher time in range, all of these improvements. I think the comments yesterday from the physician from King's College, or stick, click, and go or something, maybe just remind us what he said. Ashley obviously seemed to like that comment. She repeated it a couple times yesterday. But I do think it's interesting as these two-piece semi-disposable patches are coming to market over the next 12 or 18 months. Still not going to be stick, click, and go, or whatever that saying was.
Yeah. I think he said fill, stick, and click.
Okay. See, I knew I'd butchered it, but okay, fair enough.
We're so fortunate to work with amazing physicians like Dr. Sufyan Hussain, who sees thousands of patients in his type 1 clinic there. And as many people will know, in the UK, you see everybody in those types of services. So what is important to him and his clinic is simplicity and ease of use. And it's not rocket science. You can just imagine the simplest product is the one that's going to be most widely adopted. And, since the NIH rolled out their funding, Omnipod 5 has done incredibly well and has led to many more users being able to adopt AID. Simplicity to us is a key feature of the product, and it is no longer about just being tubeless. It's about what is that user experience like. Yesterday we showed a video of a 9-year-old River being able to do a pod change on his own, and actually Carol, who's an 87-year-old woman who uses Omnipod, and she only started using it 3 years ago at the age of 84. And it's really important to us that our technology can reach the broadest group of patients possible, because it shouldn't just be for the very educated people who are willing to put in the work to manage their diabetes. I think everyone with diabetes out there doesn't actually want to be thinking about their diabetes, and the more we can make the user experience as simple as possible, which I think Omnipod does really well, the more patients we're going to reach. I'll say, things that are important, just as a reminder for investors, is, our auto insertion of the cannula. The fact that, when Dr. Hussain says fill, stick, and click, he means literally you fill it with insulin, you take the adhesive on, you stick it on, and then you use the PDM to click, and then the cannula gets automatically inserted and there's no sharps to handle.
Yeah.
And that is a very easy user experience. And that is the product that's going to win in the market. I mean, I was with an educator just the other day, and I walked into her office and she had all the products laid out, and I said, you know, how do you talk about the features and benefits of all the systems? And she said, look, honestly, people don't want to be managing tubes, so I say that Omnipod is the only tubeless product, and that's the one that they pick.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting in that scenario a year or two from now, if having to put two pieces together and maybe put it into a docking station or not, or those extra steps that still won't look nearly as simplistic as still stick and go or
That's right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I know you're not a manufacturing person, but I'm going to ask one more that I had in my notes here on Omnipod 6. I think it is going to be configurable over the air as well,
yes.
right?
Yes.
So today, correct me if I'm wrong, Omnipod comes off the line, Omnipod 5 comes off the manufacturing line, compatible with G7.
Yes.
Now it's coming off the line, another run compatible with Libre 3 Plus.
That's right, yeah.
But if I'm a Dexcom user and I want to switch to Libre, I can't just use my pods that I got from you last month.
That's right.
I've got to run that inventory down, or, you know, let's say Dexcom G8 comes out.
That's right.
All your distributors holding G7 inventory are going to have to run that G7 inventory down because you can't upgrade the pod to G8.
That's right.
So my point on all that is this should bring some really nice manufacturing efficiencies to the company as well. I'm sure everything you're doing for 06 is for the patient, but on the manufacturing side, it should for the company have some nice benefits as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have said that Omnipod 6 will come with over-the-air updates to the pod to really streamline manufacturing and inventory management. I think it's going to be a massive benefit for patients because they'll be able to get our innovation as quickly as possible just from a software drop and not have to run through all their inventory. So yeah, that means streamlined manufacturing, distribution, all of those things. I think it's going to be a great win for the company.
Okay, great. Should we move on to fully closed loop?
Yes.
All right, good. So you're a lot more excited about it than I am, I think. I'm not clapping anyway. Evolution. So you brought out...
You should be clapping.
I should be clapping, I know, but I'm old and jaded, and we'll see where these things go over time. Evolution 3. You have the Evolution 3 data here.
Yes.
You are starting the Evolve pivotal trial for Type 2. It is started. Yes, you're enrolling that now. Remind me, how long do you think it takes to get fully enrolled in that one? And then let's talk about some of the Evolution 3 data.
Yeah, it's just started. It's a big study for us, around 300 people.
Okay.
So we'll be doing that for the majority of this year. Maybe we'll see some data next year.
But we would think at least 6 months typically to enroll a 300-patient study.
Yeah, at least.
So last patient in 6 months plus from now, and then it's a 13-week trial.
It is.
Yeah, 13.
It is.
Okay.
For the primary outcome, it is.
Yeah. No, we're just always trying to figure out the timelines and all that. So,
I know. What we've said is submission in 2027 and launch in 2028.
Yeah, understood. All right. So Evolution 3 was kind of progress from the Evolution 2 study.
Yeah.
What was different between 2 and 3? Mm-hmm. And I still am not quite sure I understand that the time and range did come down a little bit in 3 versus 2. Mm-hmm. Help me understand that a little better.
Yeah. So, so with algorithm development and feasibility studies, it's important for us to test the algorithm broadly in different populations of users. So what you saw at ATTD was data for Evolution 2,
right.
which was so that was a demonstration of fully closed loop in 24 patients with type 2 diabetes. But the settings for that did have to be entered. So we were optimizing the initial settings for what we knew the patient came in on. And so really that didn't incorporate a particularly long adaptivity period.
Okay. And
so what you saw there was really more, if algorithm was sort of at steady state, what would the outcomes be. And again, pretty small, only 24-person study. We did see 68% time in range, which was really great, and low hypoglycemia. And if you recall, we did these chunks of 4 weeks where we were really trying to find the best candidate.
Yeah, I think there were 3 different optimization strategies. Yeah. Is that right, in the E2?
That's right. So it's all about, how do we test and learn and do it quickly and innovate and find the best candidate for our fully closed loop algorithm. And so we had to do that first so we knew where we were going. And then this particular study was all about it was more about, could we start everybody on one single standardized dose and adapt over time to enable us to reach that steady state? Because if we could remove the need for doctors to enter any settings, that would be a blockbuster product. Yes. So it had very different objectives to Evolution 2. And so what we did was recruit 36 patients for Evolution 3, and they actually a very wide range of insulin requirements coming in, from 10 units to 150 units a day. And then everybody started on this one pod that you didn't have to enter any settings in. And even in that first pod, the range of insulin delivery was 24 to 54 units a day in that very first pod. And then over time, we saw that insulin delivery increase. And actually, I just realized that data was actually insulin use from Evolution 2. But in Evolution 3, the overall outcomes that we saw was baseline of 51% going up to 66% by week 6.
Okay.
And then if you look at the last 2 weeks, it was 64% time in range. And that's why what we shared in the poster was a comparison of the baseline versus the final 2 weeks there. I think what it shows, though, is that the time in range gradually increased over those weeks as the system was adapting to the needs of the user. And, this is what doctors are trying to do in clinical practice, but many times unsuccessfully doing it because it requires high contact between the doctor and the physician, doctor and patient, and then really for the patient to really figure out exactly what they're supposed to be getting. So our system can do all of that for the user. So they didn't have to bolus during the day for any meals, and there were no settings to enter, and then we did the auto titration over time for the user. So I think that's pretty remarkable. There's no other product on the market that is doing that. Our fully closed loop is really quite differentiated, and I think it's going to be a disruptive technology. Is
the vision still, and it sounds like it is, that let me ask it this way. In the Evolve study,
yes,
patients will not enter settings, or physicians won't enter settings, and you will not bolus.
Correct.
So it will be completely hands-off.
Correct.
And so the vision is still where there are 25 million type 2 patients out there in the U.S. I guess let me cut that back down to 2.5 million insulin-intensive type 2s and maybe 3 million basals, whether or not basal would ever need a pump. But there's anywhere from 2.5 to 5.5 million patients out there with almost no pump use today.
Yes.
If you can get into the primary care channel and say, all you do is put this on, doc, you don't need to know how to set anything.
That's right.
Patient, you don't even have to do anything. Yeah. That is different than a lot of these bolus optional, fully closed loop algorithms that others are dealing with, or developing, which is you can, maybe if you want better outcomes, you can bolus a couple times, you can put some settings in, but if you don't want to, then your time in range. That's what competitors are doing. You guys are trying to go 100% hands off.
That's right. Yes.
Any concern with that? Just that, I think to some of your competitive systems right now in T1, when you cannot do anything at exercise, that becomes problematic for some patients because they don't have an exercise button, something like that. If you don't give patients any chance to fuss with the system, any concern that is going to cut off its ability to work for some patients?
Yeah, I would say fully closed loop for type 2, this product is all about our type 2 audience who are not getting the care that they deserve today.
Yep.
And that product needs to be as simple as possible. In our studies, people eat whatever they want, they exercise as much as they want, and we have to prove safety under all of those conditions.
Yep.
This is primarily developed for type 2. So very differentiated, and you can't even compare it to any other type 1 system out there. That's how different it is. In terms of our type 1 population, we're going to be leading with Omnipod 6 and continue to do even more studies where we will be delivering more and more and more of that automated insulin delivery. So getting towards more bolus optional, fully closed loop systems. And we have Omnipod 6 as the platform for all of that. And that's where all the things about exercise announcements, and we have that today with activity mode, and our system does a fantastic job of that compared to any other system on the market. So we know how to do all of those things for type 1 already today.
And that type 1 feasibility for fully closed loop is getting underway shortly.
Yes.
Should we expect 2 or 3 feasibilities, 4 or 5 feasibility studies? And I know it's hard to answer that question.
Yeah, we are the market leaders today, and we know what our patients want, and that is more innovation and fast innovation. And so we need to prove safety in both adults, adolescents, and children. That's really important to us. We know what happens. We've seen what happens in the space if you release products that cause more harm than good. And so we care a lot about safety. So it will be whatever it takes, Jeff, for us to be confident in the overall safety and effectiveness profile before we release it.
Understood. All right, 2 topics, 7 minutes. So let's GLP-1s.
Yeah.
We got good triple G data this week, and there's a few other GLP-1 studies and other kind of incretin studies out over this weekend. I don't pay much attention to them as a device guy. But there's a little chatter out there once again this weekend, like, oh, we're de-escalating, de-prescribing type 2s. They're not going to be on insulin as much. The type 2 market's going to shrink over time. I mean, even with the improvements we saw in retatrutide, or however you say it, 30% weight loss, I mean, it's fantastic numbers. Where do you think the size of the type 2 market, the insulin-using type 2 market, goes over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I would say we're extremely positive about this market in terms of our ability to help with our product. I'll say, the retatrutide's data, the A1C reduction was really no better than tirzepatide and semaglutide. And so we don't really see the core benefit changing at all in terms of diabetes A1C reduction.
A1C, yeah.
So, I shared some new data that was just published from Earl Hirsch's group yesterday, where it showed with pretty recent data from Epic Cosmos database that today 41% of people with type 2 are estimated to be on a GLP-1, 41%, which is pretty high adoption. Yet, insulin use was still 26%.
Yeah.
And if you look at data from the last 10 years, that means GLP-1 has increased tenfold in the type 2 space, yet insulin has remained the same.
Yeah.
So perhaps in some early, if you have early diabetes, it can reduce the amount of insulin that you need, but we're not seeing that on a population basis. So I thought that data was really compelling.
And can I just for investors again, that was the Burstein letter, and Dr. Beck and Dr. Hirsch, as you said, their letter, right?
Yeah.
And it showed that even through the end of 25, like you said, using the Epic Cosmos data, even through the end of 25, 41% of patients on GLP-1. So we know a lot of course, type 2.
Yeah, so we know it's the
So we know, everybody's using it. But in 2007, 26% of type 2 patients were on insulin. And today in 2026, 26% of patients are on insulin. So the use of insulin by type 2 patients has not decreased, even with a significant increase in GLP-1.
That's right. That's why we're confident that there's a massive market out there of people in need that we need to go help.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. I said I had two. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Just on the GLP-1s, we also did our own research because we care a lot also about what's happening peripherally in this metabolic market. And we shared yesterday current data in 2025 of people who have type 2 diabetes who've been using GLP-1 consistently for 15 months and looking at their A1C results. So for those on a GLP-1 alone, so no insulin, the 43% had an A1C greater than 7%, so not at target. And those on basal insulin alone, over half were not at target. And for those on a GLP-1 and multiple daily injections, 67%, so 2/3 of people were not at target.
Even with a GLP-1?
Even with a GLP-1.
Yeah.
So GLP-1 is not curing type 2 diabetes.
Right. There was another, and this is a CGM comment, not a pump comment, but a couple different studies this weekend that showed, CGM use, you take off some weight, GLP-1 use, you take off some weight, but GLP-1 plus CGM was faster and greater weight loss.
Right.
So again, it just seems like technology and GLP-1s can be complementary.
Yes, and just on that note, in our Evolution 3 study, we had patients who were on everything like CGM, GLP-1, MDI, all this complex intensive therapy, but the median A1C coming into the study was 8.1%. So these people are out there not achieving glycemic control. We see this in clinical practice all the time.
Yeah, understood. Any other last topics? I think we're down to a couple minutes, and I'm supposed to check my phone and see. So I'm seeing if the Knicks game line moved for tonight. But other than checking the line on the game tonight, let me just make sure there's no questions. I don't see any questions that came in. For any investors, J.D. Johnson at R.W. Baird, if you have a quick question, but 2 minutes. Any last topic we should cover?
I mean, I think we've covered everything. So
yeah.
Omnipod 5 with algorithm enhancements, super exciting. Strive, which is Omnipod 6, cannot wait to bring that out. And then fully closed loop, which you should be applauding. I mean, come on, Jeff. I mean, it is so different from everything out there. There's nothing like it. We have proven that it can work, and we're in a study, and that's coming.
All right. Well, I'm excited for that. Where's ATTD next year?
I don't know.
I don't remember either. All right. Well, 9 months. We're looking forward to the next one in 9 months. So, Dr. Lai, thank you again for your time. It's always a pleasure. Enjoy the conversation, and best of luck. Safe travels back.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks
everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning.